When I started this morning, I had one card, but then I just kept taking notes. Now, I'm not going to repeat everything everybody said this, but I found so many similarities. How many of you really heard yourself over and over and over again today? It was very, very really impressive, and I think a number of people said it correctly. I found myself personally feeling like, what am I doing here? And why would Judy ask me to speak? You know, I went to that place. Then I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just like these women sound like me. I told my children there were only 3 things they had to do: eat, sleep, and play the piano. I didn't have a mentor as a parent, I had alcoholics. I left it when I was 14, and I went to a convent school. Oh my gosh, where's that person with St. Rose's or whatever that was? And then I started teaching the summer I turned 19. Geez, who does that? But my first mentor was that phenomenal woman who was the principal of that school. So I started looking at mentors, and how many of you ever wanted to write a book? Okay, great. How many of you never in your life think okay? I was one of those people. Now, I graduated with an English degree because it was the first one I could get, right? I had studied so many things, and I thought I was going to be a nurse, but then they said they needed teachers, and so I said, okay, I'll teach. Got an English degree, then got a biology degree, taught writing, taught school. Never going to write a book. Do you get this? Is never going to write a book, okay? But something happened. I had a defining moment. How many of you, if you don't know what a defining moment is, it's a moment that changes you. And I had a moment like that. It changes you. It changes you emotionally. It changes you, your actions. It changes you. So here's what happened to me. I was running around being important like all the other people in this room, and I was in charge of several boards, and I was on this one board. And we weren't really able to come to a conclusion, and we had a changing of the guard. And the guard said, who doesn't align with this? And they said, well, the only person who doesn't is Margaret. And she said, well, then she's off the board. Okay? So I left. But in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, do I have any friends? Like, I knew these people loved me. I'd worked with them in the trenches for years and years. I knew they loved me, but did I have friends? Like, people would stand by me. And I guess I should put oh, thanks for doing that. Okay, got my back there. And then I was in my 50s, and I thought, oh my gosh, my next decade's going to start with a 6, and then the one after that's going to be a 7, and I couldn't think beyond that, right? So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be old and friendless, lonely, right? And the only thing worse than that would be if I didn't have any money, right? Right, that'd be the absolute worst. So being a consultant and being somebody who had trained and developed people to produce results, I said, hey, I'm just going to produce some results. I'm going to get my little women together. We're going to have our cul-de-sac, and these are going to be the women I grow old with. So it wasn't like I had to stand on a street corner with my thumb out looking for women. I was in lots of groups. I had lots of female friends. But did I have the women who I would think of in the middle of the night? Where am I supposed to? Okay, the next one, guys. Okay, so I kind of asked myself this question. If your life fell apart today, who are the first 3 women you'd call upon? So I thought to myself, there's my sister in St. Louis, there's my 2 daughters, and there's my husband. I don't know how he got in there, but he got in there, right? And it wasn't like I didn't have women who would say, Margaret, if all hell broke loose, you could call me. And I would say, oh, you could call me, right? But it didn't come to my mind. So I started meeting with the women I liked, inviting them for coffee, inviting them to a lunch. And we would get in those delicious female conversations. Now, I'm a health advocate. I'm all about prevention. I would have told you, if there was a number 4, I would have said fruits and vegetables and berries. And let's please make sure that they don't have all the chemicals that we're raising our children to eat. But anyway, that was just a little side there. So I started meeting with women, and then I would have that delicious moment. Those delicious moments when you're like talking to a woman and, oxytocin is running through your body and you're like, this is great. And I would look at them and I'd say, do you want to be one of the women I grow old with? And they would say yes. And, it wouldn't matter what age they were, what part of my life they were from. It was just that moment when I asked them, do you want to grow old with me? And they said yes. And one day, I invited one of my friends to lunch. Her name's Diane Gage Lofgren. And I asked her that question. And she said, yes, Margaret. And she said, you should write a book with that title. And I said, oh, Diane, who has time, right? Who has time to write a book? And she says, well, I've written lots of books. I'll write it with you. And in that moment, there was a choice. Remember, I'm the person who was never going to write a book, never had time. People told me I should write a book about my life. If I did, you'd be here another hour and half of you'd be gone. But I remember the look on women's faces when I would ask them, do you want to be one of the women I grow old with? And I said, okay. So we started, and since we both had careers, we would write every morning from 6 to 6:30. We sent out interviews. We interviewed women, interviewed tons and tons of women. And what we saw is that women were not always engaged in intentional. So one of the things, and I took all these notes because I was thinking to myself, this is all the kind of stuff that, that I would agree with, that I would say, this is what you have to do. You have to be intentional. You have to follow through. You have to have discipline. You have to want and think ahead about your life and the path that you want it to take responsibly. So we interviewed all these women, and what we saw is, let's see, what the kinds of things that people said. One, they said, oh, I have lots of friends. And we would say, well, think again. Or, do you have a circle of friends who are really there for you? Like a true circle. Do you have, I'm sorry, but I can read that way, but I can't read that way. Are you doing what you need to do to ensure a rich safety net of women you can rely on when things are good, but also when they're not so good? So these are kind of the tough questions to ask yourself. And then the last one, which is, do you have friends you can lean on, open up to, and completely be yourself with? And once you start asking yourself that question, you begin to see that maybe you don't have that freedom that comes when some other woman has said to you, you're one of the people that I want to grow old with. So in our interviews, we ask women, what are the characteristics that you want of your female friendships? And what we saw, and I could talk about almost each of these, and I will speak about a few of them. One is, what do you think? What do you think was the number one attribute that women were looking for in their female friendships? Listening. Trust. Trust was number one. Trust was number one. They wanted to be able to trust the woman sitting in front of them. And because of a lot of different skill sets that I've developed over the years, I started thinking from interviewing with women, and we spoke about the competition that often develops between women. When you think about it, when you're just a teeny little girl, you know, life is great. Everybody's the same. Everybody's your friend, right? There's no boys. There's no girls. We're just all great, you know? And then as you get a little older, you realize that the girls play on this, you know, this soccer team, the boys on that, the girls against the boys. You start kind of building these sides where girls go off to one side, boys go off to another side. And then you get to the age of cattiness. Remember that? You know, you had your little girlfriends, then it wasn't cool to be your friend. So then your friends went over and they became friends with other girls. And then, oh my gosh, all hell broke loose. Puberty came in, and now, not only, you know, did you have to be cool, but you had to worry that your best friend was maybe going to steal your boyfriend, so you had to start competing, and all the other things. So a lot of trust became a major issue for women. The second one was loyalty. Were you going to stand side by side with that person? So in the book, we go ahead and we talk about a lot of different stories. And I think all of you got a copy of the book today. And I have other copies out there if you decide you'd like to get some more, especially for those three women. I'll be able to give a little bit of a bigger donation to JVS. But one of the things that we saw over and over again was the story of women and how, especially during difficult times, they counted on their female friends to carry the day. The other thing is where we get stuck and we don't have variety. And this was a big issue for women. And earlier this morning, I was talking to some of you outside, and it was like, well, how do you make friends when you're older? A big part of it is that intentionality and being willing to not just be with the quiet one if you're a quiet one, or the noisy one if you're a noisy one. You know, we saw that women did a lot of what we call in the book 2-2-2 thinking. She's too smart. She's too pretty. She's too this. I'm too this. And all of that 2-2-2 thinking, we call that little voice in your head Blanche. And Blanche is not always your friend, right? So all that 2-2-2 thinking keeps you from really stepping out and building the relationships and asking the questions. I really like you. Let's spend some time getting to know each other a little better. It's bold, isn't it? It is bold, but who cares? You know, who cares? Surrounding yourself with a rich net of friendships is everything. And as the doctor set up here, relationships are at the heart of all success. And mentoring is primarily those relationships that you build, because we learn from each other. So break up the routine. This was so much fun. We'd ask women what they did. So one group of women said, you know, we started this book club, but then we really got bored with the books, and we just decided we're going to call ourselves a book club without a book. And then another group of women, once a year, they went sailing in San Francisco Bay, but they really wanted to jazz it up, so they bring a tablecloth and china and crystal. I mean, you know, of course, lots of wine. I don't know how many of those glasses came off the ship. And then, oh my gosh, this was the best one, Friday bitch breakfast. Okay, so this was the one that my daughter told me about. Her friends would meet at Mimi's, you know, every Friday, and they would just be able to talk. They could talk about anything they want, talk and talk and talk. And they had one rule. What do you think it was? What's said at bitch breakfast stays at bitch breakfast. But how therapeutic is that, okay? And then the last one, a slumber party or a slumper party. One of my friends, she said when she was a child, all of her friends had slumber parties, but her mom never let her have one. For her 50th birthday, she said, I'm having a slumber party, and she invited us all over. Well, one morning at 6 a.m., I was telling Diane, I said, well, we could put in the book something about a slumber party. And she said, did you say a slumper party? I said, well, that'd be a good reason to have a little bit of fun, too, be in a slump. So anyway, break it up. Create routines. Create things that you can do together that force you to move outside of your norm and outside of that frantic lifestyle that we often get into. And then the best part, and in the book we have 10 chapters, I like to tell people this is a book that's like you can put in your bathroom or at your bedside table, because you can pick it up almost any place and find a way to really step out and enrich, maintain, and find new friends. So one of the biggest things is to really practice gratitude and gratefulness. And in a situation like today, where we really see the greatness of the female spirit. You know, I love that analogy of holding the earth up. And as women, we do that. And having power doesn't mean that we have to settle for circumstances giving us the life we want. We can create that life. We can create it in our friendships. We can create it in our careers. We can create it in things that we're passionate about. So I had a lot of things to say to you, but I think it would be very ditto. So I'm just going to thank you for being so great, being someone that I'm sure that if I talk to each and every one of you, I would say to you, do you want to be one of the women I grow old with? Thank you.